Welcome to the AI+HI project. I'm Nicole Bradford, SHRM's executive in residence for AI+HI. Thanks for joining us. This week, we're exploring what it really means to build a future of work and a future society where technology serves humanity. Our guest is Michelle L. Jawando, president of the Omidyar Network, a philanthropic investment firm shaping the digital revolution toward shared power, prosperity, and possibility. Michelle brings a powerful lens on how we can make emerging technologies inclusive and profoundly human. Michelle, welcome to the AI+HI project.
Nicole, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations are in order. And I would love for you to tell our audience about your new role and also what the Omidyar Foundation is doing around AI and the future of tech, work, and society.
Well, Nicole, again, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to spend time with you and your audience today. This is such a powerful addition to a conversation that really needs to happen. And the fact that you're able to do this on a weekly basis, you have more time than Beyonce, I think, to get everything done. So congratulations to you and your team on this. I'm so excited. Last month, I was introduced as the new president of Omidyar Network. And it's really been a moment of deep personal fulfillment and professional fulfillment, all meeting at the same time. When I think about technology and the opportunity that we have to open up spaces so everyone feels like they can belong, this moment feels particularly important and necessary for us to think about how do we create those conditions that everyone can participate and so that everyone can feel like they can belong. And so a lot of the work that we're doing at the Omidyar Network is whether it's in government or working with our philanthropic partners or working with grantees or with the private sector, we are focused on asking the question, who is at the table? Who benefits? Who's not here? Who should be here? Who's bearing the risk? And what needs to change and create the conditions so that everyone has valuable input. And I think that level of intentionality is so necessary because if we don't do that, we fall into the same traps that befell us before. And we want to change that scenario.
And your leadership has always centered justice and inclusion. How does that shape the way you think about technological change and its impact on people's lives and livelihoods?
Yeah, for me, that lens is really the central thesis of how I have always come to participate in this work. Um, I believe firmly technological change is never neutral. It really reflects the perspectives of those who are building. And I think for far too long, we've been isolated in who was at the table as we build and what voices are we listening to. And if we have conversations, particularly here in the US, about freedom, well, we're not really expanding the table if there are only a few discrete voices who are making the choices of how all of us experience technology. And so our work is really how do we broaden that table? How do we build new products and new companies and new ways of doing this work? Um, I am one of those people who is wildly optimistic about this moment. I believe that technology can be a force for good, but we have to be intentional about those choices. And so we have the moment. This is our decision. These are the decision points that we get to make. And I think that's where we're trying to really push that there's power, there's agency that we all have and we can make intentional choices for this moment.
I love that. So, our audience at SHRM are HR leaders, and they are first responders, really, for AI transformation in organizations. They're the ones who are responsible for learning and development. They're the ones who are responsible for getting the fluency up. They're the ones who are doing workforce planning. I mean, they really are on the front lines of the entire employee life cycle. And given the number of people who work at organizations, I mean, the United States has a lot of founders and entrepreneurs and, sub 100 companies, but there's a large number of people who work at organizations. So that's where our audience is coming from, and so they're really, trying to learn things that help them, get it right for their context, culture, and customers and the companies that they're in. So I'd like to double click a little bit on power and participation, and then also about AI and the future of work and who is shaping those systems, and like why does that matter, so deeply as it applies to work.
It's an excellent question, and I think I would add that when we start to think about who gets to shape AI systems, it's really a question of power. And right now, far too few people hold that power. Far too few people say that there are voices that are important to the development of this moment. And that's why we are so fierce in saying that participation from every sector isn't a nicety, it is a necessity. Let's step back and think about just kind of the future of work and the future of human dignity and the future of economic mobility.
Mm,
That can only happen when you have people who are closest to impacted communities who have designed these systems, who are leading. I love you are the light. What did you say? The lighthouse keepers, the guiding lights of so many of these companies. The reason why you can be that is because you are reflecting all of the voices and the needs of the companies that you serve.
mm,
And yet, are we building products? Are we building companies and tools that really reflect those needs? One of our grantees that we work with, Ajin Poo of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, recently worked with the private sector to develop a large language model that would support the caregiver community, that would help them think about how do I talk about wages with my employer? How do I think about setting a schedule that's reasonable for both the families that I'm working with and my own personal family? And that really centered humanity and human flourishing and the dignity that so many of us get from our places of employment. And so that just little switch where you centered the people who are closest to the work and brought them in at the table at the beginning, not at the end, made such a profound difference. And that's really what we want to do. We want to shift public interest so that people are at the table, that labor leaders and community organizers and caregivers and parents and children are at the table as technologists and CEOs and programmers and developers and venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. We believe that we can build a table that's wide enough for all of those voices, and each of those voices matter.
mhm. And one of the things that's been on my mind has been the way that AI is affecting the early career ladder and some of the signals that we're getting that Brookings has talked about, Molly Kinder,
Yes.
and some other people, where a lot of the tasks that AI is doing is sort of that entry level work. And so then what does that mean for college graduates, and how do we get, as organizations, like how do we get talent pipelines of bringing in the young people, and how do we equip them, if the work that they did in, the equivalent of their apprenticeships is
Mhm.
now done by AI? How do they become someone who can fit into organizations? So it really is something where the, a a round, full table is important for
Mhm.
us to, like, actually, figure this out.
That's
And
right.
so one of the things that I've heard you say, is that technology should work for people and
Mhm.
not the other way around. And what does that look like when it's applied to frontline workers and educators or small business owners or these populations that we've talked about?
I think about this, that technology at its highest zenith, at the highest, most optimistic way that we can think about it, should really dignify labor, should augment labor. It shouldn't just be to displace it. And I think we've made decisions as a society to say that there are roles that we want humans to be in the loop, right? When we think about what happens in retail, for instance, or
Mhm.
healthcare or finance, there's a certain level of trust when you give the vulnerable information to your care provider and say, this is my health. This is how I am understanding the relationship between my healthcare provider and myself as someone who may be going through an issue. And there's a trust that we basically, a sacred trust in that relationship. And I think what many people are saying is that I don't want the only people or the only decisions that are in that relationship to just be automated in these automatic decision systems. I want a human in the loop so that maybe perhaps there are better recommendations that someone could make or that an AI tool or model could make, but that a human is there to review it, to give me expertise, to give me a different perspective. My mom is a breast cancer survivor. And I think so many of us think about healthcare as a field where we want to see real change and advancement to kind of cure cancers and help with chronic diseases. Everybody wants that. However, we know that the ingenuity of humankind has helped us to move forward, to answer questions that before seemed unattainable.
Yeah.
Why? Because it was our human creative nodes, neural networks that we each have that were functioning. It was our experience. There are life experiences that shape each of us, that give us that constitution that says, there's a question here that I want to help solve. And that motivation has led to amazing outcomes. And I'm sorry, I get a little worked up when I think about this. That is really the piece of human flourishing. That is when
Mm.
we are at our best. And what we really want is technology to help us to answer these great questions, to help us with our curiosity, to support that work, not to displace that creativity. Um, and that's really what we're working to do.
Yeah. I too am really inspired, and I'm super inspired, even more inspired now because we're getting into the hard, what I call the hard. And so the hard is, um, you know, founders are really internalizing that your AI wrapper company is only as good as the next upgrade. ChatGPT just added meetings last week, which means that Otter, Fiverr, Fixer, uh, Fathom, all in danger. So it's hard. You have to have a deep problem. You have to solve a deep problem, not a generic problem. And then similarly in organizations, enterprise has had about 2 years on implementations, and, they've seen the field of pilot, the field of pilots, the field of poppies not turn into scalable programs, because if you don't have context, culture, customers, if you haven't done actually done the augmentation to do the workforce redesign, you don't get to the scalable
That's right.
programs. And so I'm actually excited that we're getting into the nitty gritty and the hard, and people, I hope, are moving from, dystopia and utopia to, we actually have to build these things. Now is the time. We have to sit down and we actually have to iterate towards, how to build this future of work.
That's right.
And so I'm very excited about how hard it's about to get, because I think that's good,
Yes.
for us. Um, so what I'd love to do is just, talk to you about what you think the future of work might be. I had an incredible opportunity to attend an Omidyar program where they brought together technologists and people who write science fiction to envision a better future, because there's a reason why the flip phone looked like a Star Trek communicator. Like the art around us, the stories around us actually really influence us. So, what I love about a Midyar is that you're so forward thinking. And so could you what do you believe the future of work could and should look like if the AI systems were rooted in inclusion, dignity, opportunity, augmentation? Like, what is really possible?
So I'm one of those people who happen to believe that we can create a future where work is more human, not less. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So I grew up as a super Star Trek, Star Wars, I still am, Tolkien, Octavia Butler, very, very, very engaged. That is so much of my identity. In fact, when I wrote about my vision for working and moving into this position, I wrote about the experiences of being on the living room floor with all of my family, and that watching Star Trek, Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard, the best Star Trek captain, by the way, watching those with my family became both a experience of family connection, and it opened my mind to possibility. And I think the reason why I love Star Trek so much, it wasn't that we had a universal communicator. It wasn't that you could point to the replicator and get any food you wanted. It was that they were using the technology that was created in service of every person in the galaxy, and that there was such a deep level of respect that in each world and galaxy you traveled, it wasn't, this is our technology that makes us better. It is there a way that we can both be in a learning relationship with this community? And do we have a system that could support whatever their needs were? And so, in my big future, that is what I believe. I believe that there is an opportunity for us to center humanity in all of its wonderful, quirky ways. If we center humanity and we think about technology as supporting those visions of deep curiosity, of the attainment of knowledge, of thinking about the care and concern for people and planet, to think about what it means to have equitable wages and economic mobility, and having these solutions as a part of the conversation, but not the conversation, changes everything. If we just start with the centering, and Molly Kinder, who you mentioned, is a great partner for us at Omidyar Network. If we just start with what is the life cycle of this individual? What do they need from birth to career to retirement? What gives people dignity? What makes people feel like flourishing is real? Those are the hard questions. And I think we have to do hard better. And I think sometimes we are afraid, if I'm honest, Nicole, I think people are afraid to go there because then it makes us question societal decisions we've made. It makes us ask questions about what policies do we have in place or what policies are needed, and where are the lines? And what do we say it's okay to build versus what we say, let's make a decision not to move in that direction? And so I'm excited because we are stepping into hard, and we got to learn how to do hard better. And if we as a society can come together and develop the skills that are needed to enter into this moment, I think we can come out on the other side with a better future. But it will really take all of us, and it will take some honesty and some transparency and some real intentional choices.
I have so many chills talking to. So I am in science and technology because of Star Trek,
Yeah.
because I also,
Mhm.
sat on the floor with my family and I watched this future that was an actual meritocracy
Mhm.
where, the business was supporting people all over the galaxy, no
That's
matter
right.
how many arms or legs they had,
That's
that
right.
humans had decided that we were on the same team. We
That's
cleaned
right.
up our home world, and we were going out there to help
That's
and to
right.
explore, and it just resonated with me so much. One of the things that you said that really inspired me too is that, if you just call the headlines to mind, all of the ambition is around AI as a as like technology. It's like I want the ambition around humans. I want the ambition around humans. And it's one of the reasons why HR leaders are such our precious resource because they're the first responders and they hold the employee life cycle all the way from the beginning, to the end, as well as the employee benefits that affect their families. So SHRM has 340,000 members, and those 340,000 members touch the lives of 362 million workers and their families every Monday. So it's like, so we, I believe that the world should really understand that these people, this audience of HR leaders, they're actually the ones. And if they are well equipped, if they have the support that they need, if we as SHRM, help them as we are, to you know help that transition, it's really a great tool. And so, my next question for you is, what are the specific types of shifts, whether it's business, government, or philanthropy, that leaders need to make in their mindset, to get to the place that you've described, so an AI that supports a shared prosperity. Like, what are one or two specific mental shifts or any kind of shifts that they need to make?
So at Omidyar Network, we spend a lot of time thinking about the business of tech, the governance of tech, and the culture of tech. And so in business, I think many leaders and many folks in your audience are saying, I see this wave coming and I don't know how to get ready. And I think the one thing that they should know is there are resources from trusted sources that you can lean on. So, for example, one of our grantees is Project Include, and they do amazing work as a nonprofit where they're marrying data and advocacy to think about inclusion for the tech industry and for companies. So, bespoke solutions to help industry leaders really think about how do I build in a responsible, ethical manner. And I think that's the first thing. Know that you are not alone and that there are resources and tools. And hopefully, Omidyar Network can serve as a resource for people as you're starting to think about that. And I think that there are a few questions that you always want to ask as a leader in this space. What does this mean for our workers? Has this been tested or verified by the independent third party or third party entity? Um, what has been a part of the development process? Has there been any community impact reports? Do we have communities who are helping to build these products and tools? I think everyone, particularly on the enterprise side, is constantly being told you have to buy this and this is backed by AI and it's going to make everything more efficient. And I think it's okay for folks to take a step back and ask questions and delve into the resources in the communities who could help you answer that question. When we think about governance, a great example that I'll just quickly give is Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania worked with OpenAI and SEIU and said, hey, listen, we know we want to do more to make government work for more people. And we've been hearing a lot about ChatGPT and so many others. We'd love to kind of be in partnership, but we also want to protect the rights of the workers here in government. And we know that we need amazing, talented state government employees to help us get this right. And so together, employees from the state of Pennsylvania, OpenAI, and SEIU, who know what it means to support employees and knows what questions to ask and how to protect their rights in the process, worked together and came up with tools that 95% of everyone who participated in this demonstration and pilot project said that they would do it again. It would increase their efficiency, that it saved time, but it was crafted at the beginning with workers, with labor, and with the private sector. It is a beautiful example of policymakers saying who was missing for the solutions that are needed. And I think that's what we have to continue to build. And finally, in culture, you've been a part of the conversations we're having with the leaders who are helping to shape the ideas and the narratives that we hold dear. We want to tell a new story about technology and not just one about killer robots. We want to talk about what does it mean and what will it take and what are the conditions that are necessary to get us to think about exploring the galaxy and opening up our ideas of what's possible. Right now, we are kind of stuck in an imagination of extractivism and using people and ignoring people in service of building more and more. And we want to break that up. And we want to have new ideas and we want new examples. And so we are working with writers and artists and technologists and poets to write new stories, to give us examples so that we can see and we can hear. We're working with musicians and artists so that we can hear and tell new stories about the future we want. And then we're going out to build them. And we're working with technologists and artists and storytellers, and we're working with programmers and developers who are hearing those stories and then saying, hey, I think I can build that. I think I can create that tool. So we have a team, the tech we want, that hears these new stories, creates these new worlds, and then says, let's build the companies and the products and the tools that will get us there.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We have so much to talk about. But I do want to share some. So SHRM does amazing research, and we're really fortunate. We have an incredible research team, and every month we go out to workers, not just in the United States but around the world, and find out what they're thinking. And so, in the U.S., 7 out of 10 U.S. workers who use AI agree that it enables them to accomplish more in less time and produce higher
Mhm.
quality work. And so we're seeing that like there's a lot of interest in learning more. And I think the stories, the way that you've described them, I think that really helps people, imagine what, what the potential might be. The other thing that you said that I want to reflect back on is the other thing that excites me about AI, provided we approach it in a responsible way and have some of the mindsets that you talked about, is that in the past, there were things that on a societal level we wanted, many people wanted to do. And the argument was always that there wasn't enough resource.
Mm.
But what this does is it actually provides the resource. It
That's right.
actually makes it possible. So I feel that sort of actually in the first time in decades, we actually have the ability to make fundamental changes. And the thing about AI is that because it's a systemic shift, it requires holistic solutions, and it requires solutions that address like a systemic shift. And AI, because of the ability to take structured and unstructured data, we also, for the first time, really have the ability to see the interdependencies that
That's right.
allow us to create actual change.
That's right.
And so
That's right.
it's a super exciting time. And so, you talked a little bit about the projects that you're investing in and how Omidyar is, taken this uh, sort of theory of change and value chain, really, and how you're placing bets all along the way. And for our audience, they're HR leaders, they're out there, they're doing it right now. What sort of frameworks that you come across can help us prioritize worker voice, long-term impact,
Mhm.
ethical use? Like, what are things that they can take away with them?
There are so many leaders that are a part of the audience that are participating with us here today. And often people want, like, what are some tangibles that I can take away? So let me just give that. Work with your employees and not around them. I think a lot of time what we've seen are kind of executives who say, I have to deploy this tool without getting input from their employees. Often that only deepens the distrust and it lowers the potential that employees will use the tools that are deployed to help because there's this distrust that has already been built. And that also just kind of displaces work and your overall effectiveness and efficiency. So let's focus on what can you do to bring workers in at the very beginning to empower people. AI is often thought about as a kind of top-down deployment, and I think you have to break that up. This is about human impact and who are the communities that will be affected. And so your leaders are the ones who can say, hey, before we deploy that tool, let's make sure that we have a really broad swath of our employees who can help us think about what are the needs, what are the challenges that we're trying to solve, and then let's build for that. Let's build for those challenges versus this kind of esoteric fear. I think one of the last things that I'll say is that the companies that we see that are getting AI right are ones that are built with partnership. And what that often means is often there is the like initial deployment. And what happens is people say, okay, I'm done. Like we're done. But you don't want to stop there. Actually, the initial deployment of any tool or project is just going to be the first step. You really want to think about, okay, what's missing? How can I reiterate? What's the pivot? That is who we are as humans. We create, we pivot, we shift, we make changes. Why can't we think about building the technology that is influencing our lives and businesses in the same way? So don't just settle for whatever you have. You have the right. There is a better way. And I think we can do that together.
So our last question that we always ask is, so our audience, they've heard our conversation, and what do they do on Monday? Like what's the one thing that they can do on Monday that you would suggest that they should do based on what we've talked about?
First thing, take a deep breath. You're not behind the 8 ball. You're not behind the curve. There is no wave. You are the wave. Okay. I think that's the first thing. Reclaim your agency in this moment. You are okay. So that's the first thing I would say. Monday, take a deep breath. And then the second thing I would do is I would identify 4 or 5 leaders across different spaces in the company, not all from the same tier, some at the beginning, some closer towards the end of their professional career, and really start to think about what are the questions or the challenges that we as a company want to solve, and where would you want to see creative, innovative solutions emerge? And what would that look like? What would that feel like? Where would you feel like your day is better because you did X?
Mm.
And so having those kind of core worker collaboratives in those groups who are informing actually what you need, only you know. You are the leaders of these organizations. You are closest to the problems. And too often we separate the people who understand from the solutions that we're trying to build. Let's break that up and let's really center the people who understand the problems with the people who can help to build and bring all of those voices together. So I would say do that. And then the third thing that I would say is just take some time to also play with what are tools that are available for free. I think there's a lot of talk about all of the AI tools that are out there, and people are afraid to use them. And I totally understand that. But this technology can also be transformative. And sometimes you have to kind of play in the mud. I have 4 kids. Sometimes I'm like, go out in the mud, get dirty, fall down, and then come back and mommy's right here. We'll fix that. We'll figure out how you can better understand what just happened. And I think it is important for us to kind of play with these same tools to think about what we actually want to have happen versus what's just happening to us. So take your agency back, take a deep breath, and bring in the people who are closest to these challenges and build it together.
Oh, so good. So good. And that's it for this week's episode. A big thank you to Michelle for sharing your powerful vision for a more inclusive, just, and human-centered future. Before we wrap up, I encourage you all to follow the AI+HI project wherever you enjoy your podcast. If today's conversation inspired you, please leave a review, share with your network, and help us spread the word. You can also find all of our episodes at shrm.org AI+HI. Thanks for joining the conversation, and let's keep building a future where technology serves all of us. Catch you next time.
SHRM.